Who remembers what we talked about last week?
Andy might be the only one remembering.
Well, that's because I take notes and I go back to last time's notes.
The three ways we're going.
But specifically after the cross, right?
Yes.
So far we've spent quite a bit of our time looking at what the Bible had to say about what happens to the souls of mankind. Thank you so much, love. What happens to the souls of mankind before Jesus came. And over the course of that study, we came to understand that there's a place of the dead where all the souls went, right? And that's what we see there at the bottom portion of the screen. For some of you, it's a red and a yellowish blur with a black bar in the middle. Some of you might even be able to read the font on there, but we find that Luke 16 gives us the details that Sheol, or the place of the dead, is a place divided between paradise, or a place of rest, and a place of torment. And last week, I believe, it may have been a couple of weeks ago, we discerned from that account in Luke 16 that the souls that are there have a few things. They have consciousness, right? They are able to realize where they're at and what is going on. They have memories, right? The rich man there in the place of torment remembered his family, and he called out on behalf of them, saying, "Send someone to my family that they might avoid this torment, that they might come to faith in God, that they might come to know God and avoid this." They had the ability to communicate. Again, we find the man in the place of torment screaming across this great gulf to Abraham, beseeching him that he would send Lazarus with a drip of water on his finger that he might cool his tongue, right? So there's this ability to communicate. We find that in all ways, this place of the dead is really a very physical experience, absent this physical body. Now, for Christians today, that's a hard thing for us to comprehend, right? We think that once this body is gone, we're going to be free from a lot of the things, the experiences of this body. The need to eat, right? We think that we're gonna that we might not need to eat. Well, we look at the account of the Last Supper, and what did Jesus tell his apostles before they took the wine? "I'm not going to drink of this until I eat this supper with you again in my Father's kingdom." Well, we believe that by the time that all comes around, we're going to have glorified bodies. Eating the supper in the kingdom with our glorified bodies, we're going to eat, right? So we can extrapolate some of these different things about eternity and about what our experiences are going to be like just from these different glimpses that we get into things like the place of the dead. But we found that after the cross, the people that were in paradise, the faithful believers that were there in paradises, Christ came, he preached to the people in paradise. We looked at a couple of scriptures that said he spoke to the people in prison, preached to the souls that had died from before the flood, that he went into prison, that he set captivity free, or took captivity captive, is the language in there, much like he was an invader into an army, right, or into a nation, and the nation had a bunch of captives, and he went in, and instead of just saying, "Go your own way," right, opening the gates to the captives and setting them all free to do whatever they want, he said, "Now you're coming with me. You're mine now, right? You're my captives now." Of course, we understand that this had much better connotations than physical captivity or slavery, because he was taking them with him as a part of that first resurrection. But we then looked at the throne room of God, and we saw that Christ was there again after his resurrection, after his ascension. Right? He came down from the throne room of God. He came down from heaven as God become man. He dwelt here for a time, and then he went back into heaven, back into the throne room of God. This does tie in a little bit with our message today, so just give you that little teaser for later. So in case you're starting to feel sleepy, remember to grab a cup of coffee, because it's all going to tie together. But we, and then we, I think, looked at a couple of scriptures looking at how there's a difference between faithful believers and unfaithful believers. All right, last week we looked at the resurrection event, both as recorded in Matthew 25, with the separation of the sheep and the goats, but also in Revelation 20 with the first and the second resurrection. I believe we skipped over John 3:36, but that's okay. It's there. Go there if you want. This week, though, we are going to begin to focus on the resurrection. Who wants to take a guess as to what that background painting might be depicting, if it's not too blurry? Any ideas?
It looks like the Valley of the Dry Bones.
You got it. The Valley of the Dry Bones. Exodus 37:5. Thus saith the Lord God unto these bones, Behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. And before we really dig into these slides, because I only have, I think, 4 slides ready for today, maybe 5. How far back do you think the teaching of the resurrection goes? There's no wrong answers, just guess, speculate.
I don't know, Job felt that he would be resurrected.
Right. In fact, he's one of the ones that we're going to focus on today.
I think he's the oldest written part of the Bible, they said.
Mm-hmm.
And so probably as old as Adam, to be honest, because
Right.
if it was passed down verbally before it was written, then it's probably been around the entire time.
Right. That's kind of what I was thinking as well. We find even as far back as Cain and Abel, with Abel calling to God, the blood of Abel calling to God from the ground, as God had declared. You have to wonder, at least I wonder, if it wasn't something that after the death of their son, God used to comfort Adam and Eve. Right? They had just lost a son. They had just experienced the first loss of a child that any parent had experienced. And even now, so many thousands of years later, with so many parents losing children, there's still one of the deepest griefs that a parent can feel is the loss of a child. Right? It's the reverse order of how things should be. The children should bury the parents, not the other way around. You have to wonder if God didn't comfort Adam and Eve with this this fact that there would be a resurrection, that there would be new bodies one day, that there was a difference between Abel as he died and the animals that had been sacrificed up to that point. Right? This teaching that there is a future hope, and that future hope is the resurrection. There is another scripture. I think I was going to put it in the slides, and I'm going to try and find it now. Maybe y'all can help me. When Jesus was speaking to Lazarus's family there, and Lazarus had died. He was talking to a woman, I can't remember who exactly. He told her that he was going to raise Lazarus again. And there's something specific that she says.
I think that was Martha.
Martha, do you remember the place where it's at?
It's in John.
John 11.
John 11. Let's turn over there.
That's when Lazarus was raised.
Yeah. Let's see here.
Around 24, 25 is talking about the resurrection.
Yeah, yeah. Let's just start. Would you grab 23 to 26 for us, please?
John 11:23
Yes, please.
says, Jesus saith unto her, Thy brother shall rise again. Martha said, saith unto him, I know that he shall rise again at the resurrection and at the last day. Jesus said unto her, I am the resurrection and the life, and he that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. Believest thou this?
Thank you. So you find here that even before Jesus had died and was resurrected as sort of a proof that the resurrection was in fact going to happen, that the dead could in fact be given life again, we find that the Jews looked forward to and hoped for the resurrection at the last day, or this final resurrection of the dead. We are given instances of people being resurrected to life again. Think about in, I believe it's 2 Kings with Elijah and raising no, 1 Kings 18, 19, somewhere in there, with Elijah raising the woman's son who had perished, right, in this picture of a resurrection. There are other places in the Old Testament where it occurs. That's just one that is at the top of my mind. Without any further ado, when you think about the resurrection, what are some scriptures that come to your mind? I just gave away one that comes to mind, but
One of the fun ones, and this isn't the most obvious one, but there's a fun one in the Old Testament where they were fleeing from the enemy, and they had a dead person. They had a funeral and they were going to bury him, but they didn't have time because the enemy showed up. So they threw him into Elijah's grave and ran on.
right.
And then when he hit the bottom, he stood up on his feet and he ran too.
Yes, yes, he touched Elijah's bones.
Yeah, and I've always really thought that was one of the best.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good one. What are some others? Old Testament, New Testament.
There was the funeral with the widow woman, and her son had died, and of course he would have been her only support. And when Jesus passed it, he touched the bier and the sun rose.
Right.
I've always liked that one too.
Yeah.
And there's the little girl too,
Mhm.
where he said, Talitha Kumi.
Yeah, Jesus, I never did get a solid count. Maybe that would be good for next time. But he raised quite a few people from the dead, or brought them from the brink of death when they might as well have been dead. They were just lollygagging their way out the door.
There was one, and I don't remember, was it Lazarus or whatever that was already buried, and he said, Lazarus, come forth, or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Dad always says, if you hadn't said Lazarus, they all would have come out of it.
Yeah,
So that would have been kind of spooky.
I don't think I have heard that before. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's probably what happened when he resurrected.
Yeah.
And all those people appeared that had been gone for a long time.
I think of all those that rose after the crucifixion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that rose out of their graves and walked among the people.
Yes.
And that's interesting thought too.
Yes, it is. It wasn't just a thing where one man rose from the grave as testimony that death had been conquered.
Yes.
It was a
You know,
lot.
I have often wondered about these people who have died on an operating table
Mhm.
and were dead for some time and were they, by whatever means, brought them back from the dead. And,
Right.
and some of them have stories about having seen light and actually meeting with people, relatives on the other side. And I have often wondered about that, and just we don't have anything in the scripture that speaks of that. But
Right.
I have wondered about their experience. What was that they experienced? Because they tell very some of them very detailed descriptions of people that they had never met.
Right.
And who were relatives that had passed on. And I really don't know, in some of the conversations that they had during that time, it's interesting to me. I don't know how to relate to that though.
Yeah. Just further evidence that there is capacity there to experience things when we die, right? Whether it's genuine experience where God gave them a glimpse into what comes after this life, or whether it's just a vision or something like that brought on by the body dying. There does seem to be that evidence that there is experience after we die.
And I think of the witch of Endor having brought, who was it Elijah? Who was the prophet that was brought back, and he said, "Why have you disturbed my rest?"
It was
Samson,
Samuel.
Saul and Samuel.
Samuel.
Yeah,
Sam, yeah.
those names are stored
He's-
really
Yeah.
closely up.
Why have you disturbed my rest? He was at rest and in peace, and I don't know what kind of power she might have had. I have no idea, but I don't believe it was of God.
Right. Yeah. And that one, it seems like she was a little bit surprised that
Yeah.
it actually worked.
Yes.
Yes.
But even then, we find that there was capacity there, mental capacity. He remembered who he was. He remembered who he was talking to. He was able to tell exactly what was going on. But good thoughts. Moving on, we already talked about the second question here when we first began the slideshow, but the third question, can there be a resurrection without a body? With everything that we've spoken about so far, as far as the resurrection of the dead, is that something that could happen without a body?
Well, do you mean a physical temporal body or the new body? Because there's going to be a body, but it's not going to be the same one we got.
Right. Right, but there is still that physical presence, right? There
There's
is
something.
yeah.
But I'm not sure it's the same physical because Jesus walked through walls,
Right. Yeah.
So you could argue that it's physical, but you could also argue that it's not.
Yeah. Well, we see of eating and drinking, right? So we have certainly a far more capable body, but as far as people understand, there's no body with the spirit. Is that something that could happen, right? Could we have this resurrection of the dead without some form of body?
Well, it's kind of hard for us to reference anything
Right.
without a body. I mean,
Right.
we have to have something that can be seen and sensed or else we can't sense each other.
Right.
You know, so even if we have a new body, and even if it's what you might call a spirit body, we have to have something, or else we wouldn't be able to interact.
Right. Right. Something needs to be there. In fact, when we look at the kingdom, we look at eternity. There are people bringing offerings, right? working in the land still. They're physically bringing things to Jerusalem, giving their offerings to God. They're required to go to Jerusalem once a year to bring their offering up to Him. Right? So there's we, because of our culture and actually a couple thousand years of teaching, tend to forget the physical elements of the eternal body, or of eternity. Right? We've been so conditioned in this Greek mentality that physical is bad, everything physical is bad, and the spirit is good. There's a word for it that's not coming to me now. That we, without even realizing it sometimes, allow these things to, allow this belief to alter our thinking about things, to alter how we perceive what the Lord is trying to tell us. Right? We have this mindset that that everything physical is bad, without realizing that it's only sin that brings death. Right? When God created everything, when God created the world and the cosmos, when He did so without sin, when there was no death, it was designed to go on forever. Right? That's what death is an end. It brings a physical separation between something that was in its form, and I guess it no longer is, right? At least as far as this physical nature is concerned. But we forget that God designed the earth to be inhabited and to be enjoyed by Himself with His creation. Right? Sin is what makes this life bad. Sin is what brings death to us. So we look at and into eternity as God removes sin, as God removes the devil first for those 1,000 years of His reign, and then removes sin completely with the new heavens and the new earth, something untouched by sin. We spiritualize it because we can't conceive a life or a creation that hasn't been touched by sin. But we serve a God who is capable of rebuilding everything without that sin. Right? And once sin is taken out of that, there's no more death, there's no more requirement for that separation. We find that Eden is restored. And I've been on that for a while now. I'm not going to start preaching that sermon again. We have Job 19, 25 through 27 here. This is out of the Young's literal translation. It says that I have known my Redeemer, the living and the last, for the dust He doth rise. And after my skin has compassed this body, then from my flesh I see God, whom I see on my side, my eyes have beheld, not a stranger, consumed have been my reins and my bosom. Of course, the KJV has its a far more poetic telling of that. It just is interesting here that Job, in the midst of his trial, was able to look ahead to the last days, to this resurrection event. And he says there in verse 25, the dust He raises. Right? How did He create Adam? He didn't have a physical body to go off of. He didn't have a pre-created soul to go off of. He created His body from the dust of the earth, and He breathed the Spirit of life into it. Right?
Just a fun thing to throw in there.
Mm-hmm.
When you read in the scriptures, and it talks about the dust that we were created of, if you go from a scientific standpoint, dust is the smallest particles, right? And if you look at it right, it's the corresponding chemical elements and molecules that were meant, atoms and
Yes.
molecules. And so that's a really fascinating thing to think about when you're reading, that the dust part is maybe perhaps simply referring to the essential elements of what we're made of.
Right. Yeah, we have even things like arsenic in our bodies as a element that composes our bodies. Now it's only a very, very, very small amount, but there are things that we reckon as being deadly or poisonous that we're made up of. And of course, there's a lesson there in having too much of something being bad for us.
Well, even some of the things that we eat have arsenic in them, like
Right.
almonds for
Yep.
one. Almonds, or the pit of an apricot has quite a bit of arsenic in it. And to eat one isn't going to kill you.
Right.
Even the seed of an apple has components in it that are poisonous. And that's not to say that it's going to hurt you to eat an apple seed, because I don't know, I've eaten apples, the whole apple, since I was a kid, and core and all, and I have had no ill effects from it. But there are many things like that have a purpose and have a use in our bodies.
Right.
That things like cobalt. I mean, you don't think about cobalt, but it's necessary for respiration.
Right.
And things like that we have no idea. I've been doing some studies on our makeup, and each individual is different. And I was looking at the human, is it eosinophil? No. Human eosinophil antibodies. And we each are made up with a different set of these, and in varying degrees, that gives us the potential for whatever diseases we might have. And these things are made up of atoms, molecules, things that we don't even understand how they got the way they are.
It's
And
no.
God is still in charge of all of that.
It's certainly adequate to say that we are wonderfully and fearfully made.
Absolutely.
The Lord knew exactly what He was doing when He put us together.
Each individual.
A testament of that is the fact that we live in a world where everything's trying to kill us, and yet we persist. Right?
By God's grace.
By God's grace. But good thoughts. So let's talk about Job for just a minute. We've mentioned him a couple of times. We'll turn over to Job chapter 1 just to kind of keep on moving. The account that we're given of him spans 42 chapters, which account for between 1 and 2 years of his life. Some estimates put it between 6 months and 3 years. But there's a period in Job's life that this book, that this accounting covers, and in all of this time, it doesn't once mention Abraham, Moses, Jerusalem, or Israel. Nowhere in the book of Job are these things mentioned. Now it stands out from the other books in that it's unique in this. Right? The book of Esther probably comes the closest, and even that is entrenched in Judaism. Even that is entrenched in the tribes of Judah. It mentions what tribe Mordecai is from. In fact, I'm just looking here. Esther 9:31 says, Mordecai the Jew. Right? So it specifies this. There's that idea of this lineage coming from Abraham, coming from the tribes of Israel. there. Job doesn't have that. Job doesn't have Jerusalem mentioned a single time. The Old Testament is very Jerusalem-centric. Even in Exodus and places where Jerusalem isn't specifically named, it still talks about the promised land. It still talks about a place where God will one day put his throne. Job does not have that. So we're still, despite this, given some clues in the scriptures as to who Job might have been. Right? Even the fact that it neglects mentioning these other things that are so prevalent throughout the scriptures is a clue as to who Job might have been. And there are a lot of ideas of who Job was. Some people put him later, some people put him earlier. This is just one perspective, I suppose. But I want us to understand who Job was and what little bit we know about him from the scriptures, because it's important when we consider the resurrection, this knowledge of the resurrection. It's important for us to understand who Job is and when he lived. Right? We're not talking about a belief that just sprung up with out of Babylon with Judaism as they came out of Babylon. We're not talking about something that was taken from some other religion or some other belief system and adopted into Judaism, adopted into Christianity as just a sort of a catch-all for all the things that we can't understand or describe about the end times. Right? This is something that has its roots very deeply in human history. So we read Job 1:1. It says, "There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil." Well, what's this land of Uz? Now, I don't remember if I've mentioned it here, but when I was in Oklahoma, I was allowed to bring a devotional. And during that devotional, I specified something, and that's that we're not told about a random Thursday when it was too rainy for Abraham to get out of his tent. We're not told about location out in the middle of nowhere in China. We're told about these people who lived physical lives, right? Lived real experiences. We're told the highlights and the lowlights of their lives as it concerns God. We're not told about some off day where Jacob just didn't feel like getting out of bed. We're told about how he found his wife and how he had his sons and how they went down to Egypt and were preserved there. Right? So as we're given details in the Bible, even though we might not understand them exactly, even though they might not seem all that important to us, they're there for a specific reason. The locations are put there for a specific reason. Right? There are physical ties to the Bible, to a portion of land, to an inheritance. There's physical ties. We're told about these locations because we're meant to understand this isn't just some ethereal place off in the middle of nowhere. Right? There's a location as much as there is a promise. The land of Uz is declared here for us with the intention of us understanding where the land of Uz is, or at least who Uz is. So let's go to Genesis 10, or we find that in Genesis 10, concerning who Uz is. Genesis 10, 22 and 23 tell us the children of Shem. And who's Shem the child of? Right. So Noah's son, these generations coming just after the flood. Children of Shem were Elam and Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. And the children of Aram were Uz and Hul and Gether and Mash. So we find that Uz was Shem's grandson or Noah's great-grandson. Right? Just a couple of generations removed. I believe, Shirley, how many great-grandchildren do you have?
I have 12.
12 great-grandchildren, right? You have a relationship with your great-grandchildren. You know them, you talk to them, you interact with them, you go down for entirely too long for our liking to go visit them. And we're afraid that one of these days you're just going to decide, oh, I'm here, I'm going to move here. Tony, sell my house, right? But you know them, and your life is, you're only 83 years old. As long as Noah and Shem lived, you're still considered a child, right? As far as lifespans go. So Uz was a man that he was Noah's great-grandson, and he knew Noah, talked to Noah, had interactions with him. And he was given a portion of land as mankind spread from where the ark landed. Uz found a place in a piece of land, and he decided, I'm going to live here. And he put his family there. Right? Now we have a happy little chart, and I am glad that the sun isn't shining because we can actually kind of see the chart. So this is the genealogy that we care about from Shem. Now the colors might be a little bit hard to discern, but we find that from Shem we have Elam, Asher, Arphaxad, Lud, and Aram. Now Elam, Asher, and Lud we don't care about. Their genealogies don't matter to us today. We do care about two genealogies here. The first is Aram. He was Uz's father, right? So Shem had Aram, Aram had Uz. They lived in a place. Arphaxad is a very important character as far as the Bible is considered, because it is out of Arphaxad's line that we get both Job and Abraham. Arphaxad had Selah, Selah had Eber. Eber had two sons, Peleg and Joktan. I'm probably just massacring the name pronunciation, so forgive me there. We care about Peleg because there were 5 generations from Peleg, and then there was Abraham. So Peleg, his son, son, etc., down to Abraham. That was the son of promise. Joktan had 13 sons, and one of these 13 sons was Jobab. So we find that Jobab was a relative of Abraham. And this man Jobab, living in his great uncle, hang on. I gotta figure out how many greats there are. Great uncles, I think, land. We trace this man Jobab, as is listed in these genealogies, to this man Job, living in his great uncle's land. Right. So it traces back just a few generations away from the flood. A few generations separated from then Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and the rest of that whole line in genealogy. And you think, well, Noah, why do we care? Again, I reiterate, we care because this is demonstrating that Job was taught about the resurrection in a way that at his lowest moment he remembered that he would still see God at the last day in his flesh. And it was a belief that seems to have come over from the flood, not separated all that far.
Where do we find Jobab being Job?
That is,
and I see other names that are mentioned in several different lineages at different times and in different places. And I don't know how you tie Jobab to Job.
The tie Jobab to Job is his closeness to Uz. Right, we're given Uz as being the place where he lived. So there's a connection that's meant to be made there. Right? If we were talking about someone many generations removed, this land of Uz wouldn't matter nearly as much to us because he's not in the genealogy of Abraham. Right? He's removed from Abraham. So I draw the connection there, extrapolate it from there. There isn't anywhere explicitly that says Job is Jobab, which is why I think at the beginning I said this is just one picture, right? This is kind of the earliest that man who could have been Job, as far as we read. And the reason I draw that connection is because of that genealogy there that we're given. Does that answer the question?
Not really.
No,
but,
okay.
You
It's
know,
an educated guess.
Yeah,
it's
it's-
an educated
It's
guess.
the best
Okay.
guess that I could come
But
up with.
you know, I think that there were people who believed in God
Yes.
that were not of Abraham's lineage,
Right.
and who were cognizant and aware of God after the flood. Even.
Yes.
You know, there were people who lived in other lands. Noah's sons each went somewhere,
Mhm.
and they all had remembrance of God
Right.
when they went. And I think of the wise men that came at Jesus when Jesus was born, and they had knowledge of God, and from one reason or another, they came to worship this new king.
Mhm.
And how they knew, I don't know, but God directed them, and they came. And we don't know exactly what lands they came from. They may have been different nationalities, races, whatever.
Mhm.
But they came, and they came to serve and to worship the new king.
Right.
And I think that we oftentimes wear blinders
Mhm.
that keep us from realizing that the Jews weren't Abraham, and even in Abraham's day, I believe that there were people who served God.
Yeah.
And before Abraham was directed to leave the Ur of the Chaldees.
But we find in the scriptures the reason why it's so Abraham-centric, so Israel-centric, is because that's where God chose to put his promise.
Yes.
We find that the nation of Israel, the land that they inhabit, is important to God because that's where he decided to put his throne. Right. So while there may have been other people who had an awareness of God or who even worshipped him in some capacity before other we'll just call them spiritual entities went in and perverted that with these pantheon of different gods and things attributed that they were attributing to the wind and the sea and the sun and etc. Before it got perverted. But all of that is really between them and God. We care about Abraham. We care about specifically the line of Shem, right? Out of all the other sons of Noah, the two other sons of Noah, we care about Shem's line because that's the line that God brought his promise through. And it's that promise that we adhere to. It's that promise that we have our hope in.
Just to put it short and quick for you, you have a toolbox full of tools, and they're all good tools. But you have a project, you're only going to use the ones that serve your purpose, okay? And God has had a whole world full of people, and there were a lot of good people. But he only had certain ones that were going to serve his purpose.
Yep.
Okay? And that's why we focus on those people, is because they were given to us to teach us about God's purpose and our relationship with God and our purpose that he gives us.
Okay, but that's only on that project.
Well, God has one main project.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's all that we have time for today.